Hey everyone, and welcome. Tonight, let's chat about something so basic, so automatic for us, that we barely even think about it: waking up on time. We have phones that chirp, buzz, and practically sing us out of bed. But what about 1,000 years ago? In the Middle Ages, how did you make sure you were up to milk the cow or open your workshop without a single digital display or snooze button in sight? It's a bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? If you had to rely on their methods to get to an important meeting, you might find yourself in a spot of trouble. It makes our daily battle with the alarm clock seem like a rather modern, and perhaps slightly privileged, little problem. Before we listen for the alarm clocks of the past, if you're enjoying these quiet journeys, maybe give that like button a little click, or consider subscribing so we can continue to meet here in this calm little space. As always, I love seeing where you're all tuning in from, so feel free to leave a note in the comments. I hope you're somewhere cozy, with the lights turned down low, ready to let your mind drift. Alright, let's take a gentle breath, and ease our way into a medieval morning. For the vast majority of people living in the Middle Ages, life was governed by a clock that was immense, utterly reliable, and completely beyond their control: the sun. In a world predominantly agrarian, where upwards of 90% of the population worked the land, the daily and seasonal cycles of the sun dictated the rhythm of almost everything. Daylight was a precious, finite resource, and it was the primary determinant of the working day. You rose with the light, worked while you could see, and rested when darkness fell. This fundamental reality shaped not just their work schedule, but their very concept of time. We are accustomed to our fixed, equal hours, 60 minutes, 24 times a day, unchanging. The medieval world, for the most part, did not think this way. They often operated on what are sometimes called temporal, unequal, or seasonal hours. In this system, the period of daylight, from sunrise to sunset, was always divided into 12 hours. This meant that a daylight hour, in the long days of summer, was significantly longer than a daylight hour, in the short, bleak days of winter. A summer hour might stretch to feel like 75 of our modern minutes, while a winter hour could shrink to a mere 45. The night was similarly divided into 12 night hours. This system was intuitive and practical. It meant that certain tasks were always associated with a specific hour, say, the third hour after sunrise, regardless of the time of year. It was a time-keeping system perfectly adapted to a life lived in partnership with the natural world. So, the first and most fundamental answer to how people knew when to wake up is that the sun, in a way, woke them. The gradual brightening of the eastern sky was an unmissable signal that the period of rest was ending and the period of labor was about to begin. In homes that were often simple, single-room dwellings with small, unglazed window openings or just a door, the changing quality of light would have been an inescapable part of the sleeping environment. A sliver of gray turning to pale yellow, filtering through a crack in a shutter or illuminating the smoke hole in the roof, was nature's gentle but firm announcement. There was no jarring alarm, but rather a slow, organic transition from the deep darkness of night to the usable light of day. This gradual awakening allowed the body's internal clock, its circadian rhythm, to align naturally with the solar cycle. For a farmer, a shepherd, or a village craftsman, there was no need for a precise 6 a.m. start. The start was simply dawn, whenever that might be. Of course, nature provided a more audible alarm as well, one that is still a potent symbol of morning in rural areas today: the rooster. The domestic chicken was a ubiquitous part of medieval life, a vital source of eggs and meat for all but the very poorest. And with chickens came the rooster, or cockerel, with its famously punctual and piercing crow. The rooster's crow, often beginning in the pre-dawn darkness and continuing with vigor as the sun rises, served as a reliable, community-wide wake-up call. Chaucer, in his Canterbury Tales, famously described the rooster chanticleer, who knew the time by nature more accurately than any church clock. This wasn't just poetic fancy, it reflected a lived reality. A rooster's crowing would echo through a village, from one cottage's flock to the next, creating a natural chorus of awakening. It was a sound so integral to the start of the day that it became synonymous with it. It signaled not just the arrival of light, but the call to action. It was time to stir, to rekindle the fire, to step outside and begin the endless cycle of chores that defined medieval life. Other animals, too, would add to this morning symphony. The lowing of a cow, hungry for her morning milking, or the bleating of sheep would serve as further reminders to the farmer that his day, and his duties, had begun. This reliance on natural signals fostered a deep, intuitive sense of time that we have largely lost. Medieval people were expert observers of their environment. They could likely gauge the time of day with considerable accuracy simply by observing the sun's position in the sky, the length and direction of shadows, or the subtle changes in the quality of the light. They didn't need a watch to tell them it was mid-morning. The height of the sun would suffice. This intimate connection to the natural world was the bedrock of their temporal awareness. Waking up was not a private, isolated event triggered by a machine. It was a communal, environmental process, a shared experience of the entire village or farmstead responding in unison to the grand, silent turning of the earth toward the sun. Now, settle into that feeling. Imagine you are not in your bed now, but lying on a simple straw-stuffed mattress in a small, timber-framed cottage. It is sometime in the 14th century. The air is cool and smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and sleeping humanity. There are no street lights, no humming refrigerators, no glowing digital displays. The darkness inside your small home is almost total, a thick, velvety blackness. You are sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of the physically weary. You are a farmer, and yesterday was a long day of mending fences and turning the soil in the small strip of land you farmed for the local lord. Slowly, almost unconsciously at first, you begin to stir. Something is changing. The absolute blackness in the room is softening at the edges. Through the single, small window opening, covered by a thin wooden shutter that doesn't quite fit, a sliver of the world outside is no longer black, but a deep, washed-out gray. It's the first hint of prima lux, the first light. Your body registers it before your mind does. Your breathing changes, becoming a little shallower. A draft of cool, clean air drifts through the gap, carrying the scent of morning dew on grass. And then comes the sound. It starts with a single, defiant cry, sharp and clear in the stillness. Cock-a-doodle-doo! It's your neighbor's rooster, the one who is always the first to herald the dawn. His call is answered a moment later by your own rooster from the small lean-to against the cottage wall, and then another, and another, from across the village green. It's a cascading chorus, a rustic symphony that cuts through the last vestiges of sleep. It's not a jarring, unpleasant sound like a modern alarm. It's a sound of life, of routine, of another day beginning as countless days have before. You open your eyes. The room is still dark, but shapes are beginning to emerge from the gloom. The rough outline of the wooden chest at the foot of your bed, the faint silhouette of the hearth where the embers from last night's fire are now just gray ash. You can hear your wife breathing softly beside you, her sleep also disturbed by the morning's call. From a small cot in the corner, you hear the rustle of your children stirring. Outside, another sound joins the chorus, the impatient lowing of your family's single cow, her udder full, her stomach empty. She is a clock of her own, her needs marking a non-negotiable point in your morning schedule. You lie still for another moment, gathering your thoughts, feeling the cool air on your face. There's no rush, no frantic grabbing for a phone, no jolt of adrenaline. The process of waking is gentle, gradual. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet meeting the cold, hard-packed earth of the floor. You pull on your simple woolen tunic, the rough fabric familiar against your skin. You move to the hearth, your movements slow and practiced in the semi-darkness. You blow gently on the embers, adding a few dry twigs, coaxing a tiny flame back to life. As the fire catches, casting a warm, flickering glow, the small room comes alive. You can see the rough-hewn beams of the low ceiling, the simple pottery on a wooden shelf, the sleeping dog curled by the fire, its tail thumping softly as it senses you are awake. This is the beginning of your day, a day that will be measured not in minutes and seconds, but in light and shadow, in the needs of your animals, the position of the sun, and the familiar, reassuring rhythm of the seasons. You have woken up, not because a machine told you to, but because the world itself has told you it is time. In the medieval world, the Christian church was not just the center of spiritual life, it was the heart of the community, and its primary organizing principle. Monasteries and cathedrals, with their towering belfries, housed the most sophisticated technology of the age and functioned as the official timekeepers for everyone. The rhythm of life within a monastery was meticulously structured around a cycle of 8 daily prayer services known as the Liturgy of the Hours or the Canonical Hours. These were matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. Each service was announced by the ringing of bells, a sound that carried for miles across the surrounding countryside, and these bells effectively structured the day not just for the monks and clergy inside the walls, but for the lay people outside as well. The bells were the town's clock, its schedule, and its conscience, all rolled into one. Let's break down this monastic timetable, as it formed the blueprint for the medieval day. The day began in the deepest darkness with matins, a long service sometimes held as early as 2 a.m. This was followed at first light by lauds, a service of praise as dawn broke. For the layperson, the first bell they would likely be concerned with for waking was prime, typically rung around 6 a.m. This bell signaled the first hour of the daylight and was a clear call for the working day to begin in earnest. Following prime, the day was punctuated by further bells. Terce, at the third hour, around 9 a.m., might mark the time for a first meal or a short break from labor. Sext at the 6th hour, or midday, signaled the main meal of the day and a period of rest, similar to the Roman siesta. None at the 9th hour, around 3 p.m., marked the resumption of afternoon work. As the day wound down, vespers would ring out at sunset, signaling the end of the workday for many. It was time to down tools, bring the animals in from the fields, and head home. Finally, compline, the last service after nightfall, was the signal for sleep. The great bell would toll for the curfew, the ignatigium or cover fire bell, reminding everyone to extinguish their lamps and fires and retire for the night. After compline, a profound silence was meant to fall over the monastery and the surrounding community. This sonic timetable provided a shared framework for public and private life. A merchant in town would know to open his shop shortly after the bell for prime. A blacksmith would know it was time to cool his forge when he heard vespers. A housewife would time her cooking for the main meal to be ready around the bell for sext. Contracts might specify that a payment was due before the bell of vespers, or that a worker's day ended at the sound of the evening bell. It was a system that was both flexible, as the exact timing of the solar-based hours would shift with the seasons, and yet rigidly structuring. The sound of the bells was inescapable, a constant, audible reminder of one's duties to both God and community. It created a collective consciousness of time. Everyone in the town knew, simultaneously, that one part of the day had ended and another had begun. This was profoundly different from our individualized, private experience of time, where we each follow the silent dictates of our own personal clocks. In the Middle Ages, time was a public announcement, a shared sonic landscape. The bells themselves were objects of great pride and significance. They were often given names, ceremonially consecrated or baptized, and were believed to possess the power to ward off evil spirits, storms, and lightning. The role of the bellringer, or sacristan, was a vital one. He was responsible for maintaining the bells and, more importantly, for ringing them at the correct times. In monasteries, this might be determined by observing a sundial on a clear day, or by using more sophisticated timekeeping devices at night or on cloudy days, such as a water clock, clepsydra, or a candle marked with hours. The accuracy could vary, but the consistency of the rhythm was what mattered. The peal of the bell for prime might not be at precisely 6 a.m. every single day, but it was the universally accepted signal that the day had officially begun. It was the sound that shook the town from its slumber and set the wheels of daily life in motion. Now, let's shift our perspective. You are no longer a farmer in an isolated cottage, but a weaver, living with your family in a small, bustling medieval town. Your house is a narrow, two-story timber-framed building, sandwiched between a baker's shop and a leatherworker's. Your world is one of closer quarters, of shared walls and the constant low hum of your neighbors' lives. You still wake with the first hint of light filtering through your horn-paned window, but your primary, definitive alarm is the bell. You are lying in your bed, the sounds of the natural world, the roosters, the birds, are distant, muffled by the surrounding buildings. What you are listening for, what your entire body is attuned to, is a different sound. And then it comes. A single, deep, resonant bong from the great bell in the tower of the Church of St. Peter, the largest church in your town. It's the bell for prime. Its sound seems to vibrate in your very bones, a powerful, commanding call that cuts through the morning quiet. It is followed by a faster, more cheerful peal from the smaller bells, a cascade of sound that tumbles over the rooftops and down into the narrow streets. This is it. The day has officially started. There is no ambiguity, no. Just 5 more minutes. The bell is the will of God and the order of the community made audible. You can hear the town waking up in response. Below you in the baker's shop, you hear the scrape of the oven door and the rhythmic thump of dough being kneaded. Next door, the leather worker begins a coughing fit, a regular part of his morning routine. Your wife is already stirring, and you know that your own day's work at the loom awaits. You rise and dress, the sound of the bells still echoing in your ears. As you eat your simple breakfast of dark bread and weak ale, you hear the bell for terce ring out. You know that by this time, the market square will be full, the merchants will have their stalls set up, and the first business of the day will be in full swing. The bell is a pacer for your morning. You know how much work you need to get done on the loom before the next bell. It structures your thoughts, your efforts. You work steadily, the clatter of your loom filling your small workshop, a personal rhythm set against the larger, public rhythm of the town's timekeeper. The sun climbs higher, and a shaft of light moves across the dusty floor of your workshop. You barely notice it, because your internal clock is set to the bells. When the deep toll of sext rings out at midday, you know it is time to stop. You lay down your shuttle, your shoulders aching slightly. The bell for sext is a welcome sound. It means the main meal, a pottage of vegetables and perhaps a little meat that has been simmering over the fire all morning. It means a brief rest from your labor. You and your family eat together, and afterwards, you might doze for a short while, the sounds of the town outside quieting as many others also take their midday rest, all prompted by that same, single sound. The afternoon work is marked by the bell for none. This bell always feels a little more melancholy to you. It signals that the best part of the day's light is gone, and the remaining hours of work stretch before you. You work on, the light in your workshop beginning to fade, until the welcome, gentle sound of vespers rings out as the sun touches the horizon. This is the signal of release. The workday is over. You can see other craftsmen emerging from their workshops, wiping their hands, their faces weary but relieved. The streets become busier again for a short while as people head home or perhaps to the tavern for a quick ale before it closes. Finally, as darkness fully envelopes the town, the great curfew bell, the Compline bell, tolls its slow, solemn warning. It's a sound that tells you to bar your door, to cover your fire, and to prepare for sleep. The day, which began with a bell, has now been officially ended by one. Your life is framed by this sonic architecture, a daily journey from the first bong of prime to the last. You are living in a world where time is not something you check on your wrist, but something you hear with your ears, something you feel in the air, a shared pulse that unites you with everyone else in your sleeping, waking, working town. While the sun was the master of the day and the bells translated its journey into a public schedule, keeping time accurately through the long, dark hours of the night, or on days when the sun was hidden, presented a significant challenge. This was particularly crucial for monasteries. The monks' rigid schedule of prayer did not stop when the sun went down. The pre-dawn service of matins had to be held at the correct time, regardless of the weather or season. To solve this, more sophisticated, self-contained timekeeping devices were developed and employed, primarily within these religious and scholarly communities. One of the most ancient and effective of these was the water clock, or clepsydra. The principle was simple. Water would drip at a relatively constant rate from one vessel into another, and the level of the water in the second vessel would indicate the passage of time. These could range from simple pottery bowls to more elaborate mechanisms. By the High Middle Ages, some monasteries had developed quite complex water clocks with gears and linkages that could automatically strike a small bell to alert the monk responsible for ringing the main church bells for the nocturnal services. These were, in essence, the first automated alarm clocks, though they were large, institutional, and required constant maintenance. Another common nocturnal timekeeper was the candle clock. This typically involved a large, specially made candle of a standard size and wax composition, marked with lines, often in metal bands, to denote the hours. As the candle burned down past each mark, a specific amount of time had passed. Some even had a nail or a metal ball embedded in the wax at a certain hour mark, so that when the wax melted to that point, the nail would fall and clatter onto a metal dish below, creating a sound to wake the designated person. The legend of King Alfred the Great inventing such a device to manage his time for study, prayer, and governance speaks to the importance of structuring one's time, even for a king. Sandglasses, or hourglasses, were also used, though they were better suited for measuring shorter, fixed durations rather than the entire night. All of these devices, water clocks, candle clocks, sandglasses, were ingenious solutions, but they were not personal timekeepers. They were expensive to make, required careful tending, and were generally found only in well-funded institutions like monasteries, royal courts, or perhaps the homes of the very wealthy. For the average person, the night remained a largely unmeasured, fluid expanse of time, bookended by the curfew bell of Compline and the first crow of the rooster, or the bell for lauds or prime. This leads us to a fascinating aspect of medieval life that historians and sleep scientists have explored: the concept of segmented sleep. There is a growing body of evidence from historical documents, diaries, court records, medical texts, and literature, suggesting that for much of human history, the modern pattern of sleeping in a single, consolidated 8-hour block was not the norm. Instead, many people experienced what is called biphasic sleep, two distinct periods of sleep separated by a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. This period of waking, which could last for an hour or more, was not seen as insomnia or a sleep disorder. It was a normal, expected part of the night, and it had a name: the watch, or dorval in French. People would go to bed a couple of hours after dusk, sleep for what they called their first sleep, and then wake up sometime after midnight. This waking period was a unique time. The world was quiet and dark. It was a private, introspective time, free from the social and labor demands of the day. People would use this time for various activities. For the pious, it was an ideal time for prayer and quiet religious contemplation, a personal echo of the monks' nocturnal vigils. Some would simply get up to tend to the fire, check on their livestock, or use the chamber pot. It was a time for quiet conversation with a spouse, for intimacy, or for simply lying in bed and reflecting on one's dreams or the events of the previous day. Some medical texts from the period even advised that this was the best time for marital relations, as people were more rested than at the end of a long day. After an hour or so of this quiet wakefulness, they would return to bed for their second sleep, which would last until dawn. This pattern makes a lot of sense in a pre-industrial world. The long winter nights, with 14 or more hours of darkness, would be difficult to sleep through in one go. Segmented sleep broke up this long, dark period, making it less daunting and providing a useful interval for quiet tasks and reflection. The decline of this sleep pattern seems to have coincided with the advent of better street and domestic lighting in the 17th and 18th centuries, and was further cemented by the rigid schedules of the Industrial Revolution, which demanded a more consolidated and efficient approach to sleep. Now, let's settle back into your medieval self. You are the weaver from the town we visited earlier. You heard the Compline bell toll a few hours ago, barred your door, and went to your bed, weary from your day at the loom. You fell into your first sleep, quickly, a deep and heavy slumber. Now you find yourself drifting back to consciousness. There's no alarm, no sudden noise. It's a gentle, natural stirring from within. You open your eyes. The room is steeped in a profound darkness, but your eyes, long accustomed to it, can just make out the faint, silvery light of the moon filtering through the horn window pane, casting a pale rectangle on the opposite wall. The town outside is utterly silent. The boisterous noise from the tavern has long since died away, and the last of the watchman's calls feels like a distant memory. This is the deepest, quietest part of the night. You don't feel groggy or annoyed at being awake. It feels normal, peaceful. You can hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of your wife and children, all still sound asleep. The only other sound is the faint hiss and pop of the banked fire in the hearth, a tiny core of warmth in the cool room. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the rustling straw mattress too much. This quiet hour is yours. Sometimes you use it for prayer, murmuring the few simple Latin phrases you know, a quiet conversation with God in the stillness. Tonight, however, you feel restless, your mind still turning over a complex pattern for a new piece of cloth you are planning. You slide quietly out of bed. The floorboards are cold beneath your bare feet. You tiptoe over to the hearth and add a small, dry piece of wood to the embers. A tiny flame flickers to life, providing just enough light to see by. You sit on a low stool, the fire's warmth a comfort on your shins, and simply think. You mentally trace the threads, the interplay of colors, the rhythm of the shuttle. In the focused quiet of this midnight watch, free from the distractions of the day, the solution to a tricky part of the design comes to you, clear and simple. There is a creative power in this silent, wakeful period. After a while, you feel your thoughts begin to slow. The brief burst of inspiration has passed, leaving a sense of calm resolution. You feel a gentle wave of sleepiness returning. Your second sleep is calling. You bank the fire again, ensuring it is safe, and slip back into bed. Your wife stirs slightly, and you murmur a quiet word of reassurance. As you settle back onto the mattress, you are not anxious about getting back to sleep. You know it will come. You lie there, listening to the profound silence of the sleeping town, feeling a sense of connection to all the other households, knowing that in many of them, others are also experiencing this quiet, midnight interval before drifting back into their second slumber, a shared, unspoken rhythm of the night that binds you all together until the first bell of lauds signals the coming of the dawn. Beyond the natural cues of the sun and the rooster, and the institutional rhythm of the church bells, there were more personal, human alarm clocks that played a role in rousing the medieval sleeper. One of the earliest of these human sounds was the final call of the night watchman. As we've explored before, the watchman's primary duty was to guard the sleeping town, but his hourly calls also served as a time signal. His last calls in the pre-dawn darkness, announcing the 4th or 5th hour of the morning, were a signal that the long night's vigil was ending and the workday was imminent. For early risers, like bakers who needed to get their ovens fired long before dawn, or priests preparing for the first services, the watchman's call might be their primary prompt. His voice, cutting through the final, deep silence of the night, was a reassurance that order had been maintained, and a clear, human signal that it was time for the first stirrings of the new day. In some towns, this role of professional waker would evolve over the centuries into the knocker-up, a person whose specific job was to walk the streets in the early morning and tap on the windows of workers with a long pole to ensure they were up in time for their factory shifts, a practice that continued well into the Industrial Revolution. But in the Middle Ages, the watchman's cry was the most common form of this human alarm. As the first light appeared, other human sounds would begin to join the roosters and the bells. The rhythmic, heavy thud of the baker kneading dough in his trough was often one of the first sounds of industry to break the morning stillness. The clatter of a blacksmith's tools as he laid out his forge, the scrape of a shopkeeper's shutter being opened, the creak of a cart's wheels as a farmer headed out to his fields early, all these individual sounds would slowly build upon one another. They were the sounds of a community coming to life, each person's activity a note in a growing symphony of work. Inside the home, the stirring of one family member would inevitably rouse the others. In households that often consisted of a single room where the entire family slept, privacy was non-existent, and so was the possibility of sleeping in while others were up and about. The sound of a parent getting up to tend the fire, the cry of a hungry baby, or the chatter of early rising children would be an effective and unavoidable wake-up call for everyone else. Waking up was a shared family event, a collective transition from the quiet intimacy of sleep to the shared labors of the day. This combination of natural, religious, and human signals fostered a much more holistic and integrated sense of time and waking. People were not jolted from a deep sleep by a single, sharp, artificial sound. Instead, they were gently nudged and coaxed into wakefulness by a crescendo of familiar cues. It was a process of gradual emergence, aligning their internal state with the external world. First, the subtle change in light. Then, the first animal calls. This would be followed by the distant, authoritative clang of the church bell for lauds or prime. Finally, the sounds of their own household and their neighbors beginning their daily routines would complete the process. This multi-layered alarm system was inherently gentle and arguably more in tune with the body's natural rhythms. There was no single moment of waking up, but rather a period of awakening, a slow and steady transition. This meant that medieval people likely possessed a more fluid boundary between sleep and wakefulness, a state we might have to consciously cultivate with meditation or gentle wake-up apps, but which was simply the daily reality for them. Their sense of time was not about precision to the minute, but about an awareness of the appropriate moment for a task, signaled by a rich tapestry of environmental and social cues. Now, for the last time, let's return to that medieval world. You are lying in your bed in your second sleep. This sleep is lighter than the first, closer to the surface, filled with faint, fleeting dreams. You are not the farmer, nor the weaver, but simply you, resting in a time long past. You are floating in that peaceful, liminal state just before dawn. The first signal is a change in the quality of the air. A cool, damp freshness seeps into the room, a sign that the night's deep chill is beginning to recede. Then comes the light. It's not a beam, just a gentle dilution of the darkness, a slow turning of the world from black to gray. Your eyelids feel this change even while they are closed. Your body, in its ancient wisdom, knows this signal. It begins to slowly pull you towards the surface of consciousness. The first sound you register is the distant, lonely crow of a single rooster. A few moments later, another answers, slightly closer. Soon, a scattered chorus begins, a familiar and reassuring sound that tells you morning is near, but not yet here. You drift. The sound is part of your dream for a while, a dream of summer fields and warm sun. Then, another sound joins in, deeper and more resonant, rolling across the landscape from the town's church. Bong, bong, bong. It's the bell for lauds, the praise service at sunrise. It is not a frantic, demanding sound. It is slow, measured, majestic. It doesn't startle you, but rather anchors you, placing you in time and space. It confirms what the light and the roosters have already suggested. The night is over. You are still resting, but you are aware. Your sleep is now a shallow, peaceful waiting. Now sounds from within your own home begin to filter through. You hear the soft scrape of your mother or father moving across the room to the hearth. You hear the gentle click of flint and steel, then the soft whoosh as a spark catches on the tinder. A faint, warm, smoky smell reaches you, the smell of your home, of safety, of a new day. You hear the low murmur of your parents' voices, quiet and intimate in the early morning. They are not sounds that demand your attention, but they are sounds of life, of presence, that gently pull you further towards the waking world. You hear the contented sigh of the family dog, stretching by the growing warmth of the fire. The layers of awakening are building, one on top of the other, like a rising tide. You open your eyes. The room is filled with a soft, gray light. You can see the familiar patterns on the woolen blanket that covers you, the rough texture of the wall beside your bed. You turn your head and see your siblings sleeping soundly beside you, their face peaceful in the dim light. There is no urgency. The bell has rung, but the day's labor has not yet begun. This is a quiet, in-between time, a moment to lie still and feel the world wake up around you. You stretch your arms and legs, a slow, luxurious movement. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the cool morning air. You feel rested, not groggy or disoriented. You have been woken not by a shock, but by a process, a gentle and collaborative effort between the sun, the animals, the church, and your own family. You are ready for the day. And as you lie there, in that peaceful, medieval dawn, let that feeling of gentle, gradual awakening wash over you. The day is new, the world is quiet. The harsh demands of modern timekeeping fade away, replaced by a softer, more natural rhythm. There are no deadlines to meet in this moment, no schedules to check. There is only the quiet certainty of the rising sun and the slow, steady pulse of a community coming to life. Let the memory of those layered sounds, the distant rooster, the resonant bell, the crackle of the hearth fire, the soft murmur of voices, be a gentle lullaby. The need to wake up is over. The day is taken care of. Now is the time for rest. Let the peacefulness of that slow medieval morning, a world waking without hurry, guide you into your own deep and tranquil sleep. The watch is over, the bells are silent for now, and all is well. Good night.